In this video, I'm going to show you how to query your own database in your AI agent workflows. Let's go ahead and get started. So here I have a workflow, and this workflow is going to take in a user query. And what we want to do is we want the ability to actually query this existing database here. You can see that I have a database set up inside of Supabase, and it has this giant user table of different users, their usernames, and some example emails. And let's say we wanted to figure out how many users we have with the last name Williams. Well, the way that we would do that is by querying the database inside of our workflow. Let's go ahead and we'll add a new block, and we're going to search for the query database block. And if you notice on the right hand side, we'll have to actually link our account to our database. The way we do that is by clicking here and connecting a new account. And then we're going to have some information to fill out. We'll need to select our database type and add some additional information below. Now, this particular database is a Postgres database. And so we have this Postgres database set up here. You also have MySQL or Microsoft SQL Server. And then we need to find the host, username, the database, and the port. The password is our own authentication token into that database. So we typically create that when we create our database. So inside of Supabase, the way that we do that is by clicking on this connect button. And this connect button shows you a bunch of different ways to connect. We're going to use this transaction pooler, and that's going to show us some parameters here. So here we can find the host name, and we'll just start copying this information in. So here I'm going to paste in the host name. We have our port. So we're going to include the port here at the bottom. And then our database, Postgres, we're going to include in the database here. And then the username, here's the username. We'll go ahead and copy that in as well. And then the password we'll enter. Again, this is just our authentication token that we make when creating our database. So now that we have our database connected, we can begin and we can select our database. And then we need to add a query. And this query is going to be using the specific querying language that we'd like to query the database with. And in this case, it's going to be a Postgres query. And so instead of writing a query here, I want this query to be dynamic. And the way that we allow it to be dynamic is by adding a generate text block and using an AI prompt, because the model can create this query for us. So we have this initial user query, and that's going to be in plain English. And we want to actually translate that into a Postgres query using AI. So let's go ahead and write our prompt. We're going to say something like, why don't we have our request? And our request is going to say, based on the user query, generate a Postgres query that accomplishes the task listed in the user query. Let's go ahead and fix a couple of these typos here. There we go. And there we go. And let's go ahead and include the user query at the top. So I'm going to add these tags, user query. And we'll add another tag, user query. And inside of those, we will add the variable user query that is coming in from our user input here. Next, we want to make sure that we include the database schema so that it knows exactly how to format the query. And so we can do that simply by adding another section. We'll call this database schema. And then we will include a schema in tags so that it knows that this is indeed the schema. Inside of those tags, we want to give it a couple of things. One, we want to give it the table name. So we'll add some tags called table name. And make sure we close those tags out, table name. And then we will just give it the name of the table here inside of our database. So in this case, it's called sample_users. So your database table might be a little bit different, or you might have multiple tables, in which case you'll include multiple tables in there. But I'm just going to include sample_users. And then underneath the table name, we need to actually give it the columns of the table. So I'm going to include another tag called columns. We'll close out the tag columns. And inside of these tags, we're going to include all of the columns that are included in the table. And so this includes the ID, the username, the email, the first name, the last name, the created at timestamp, and the is active Boolean value. So I'm going to go ahead and just put in all of these. So we have the ID, we have the username, we have the email, we have the first underscore name, we have the last underscore name, and then we have, let's see here, the created at timestamp and the is active value. So we have created at and is active. There we go. And then the last part of this prompt is we will want to include a section on response formatting. And we might want to say something like only output the query and nothing else. And we can even emphasize this by saying this is important because your output will be injected into the next step of the workflow. And there we go. We have our prompt all set up. So now what we want to do is actually save this to a variable. We can call this variable refined query. And then we can take the refined query and just make that the query to the database. So we're going to use that refined query. Let's go ahead and save the output of this query database block into something like query result. And then we'll pass that value through to a display content block where we can display that query result. And so just like that, let me go ahead and organize this. You can see here we have our completed workflow that is querying the database, and you will be able to use this later on in your workflow. I'm simply displaying it, but you may want to do other things with this information. So let's go ahead and test this out. Remember, we wanted to see how many users and list all the users that have the last name Williams. So let's go ahead and do that. We will open up the draft agent to test this out, and we will say all users with last name Williams. There we go. And now we can go ahead and run this. It's going to translate that into an actual Postgres query, and you can see what we get in return is all of the users with the last name Williams in this nice JSON format. So that is how you query databases using the query database block. Hope you learned something in this video. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to drop us a like, leave a comment if you have questions. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.